the trap that we fall into as like professionals in our work is we too often lose sight of the customer experience. And I say that as like, I work in customer experience every day, all day. And so like, if it isn't ingrained into my mind, then like, whose would it be, right? So the thing that I would hope for teams would be recentering around the customer experience, because I think we fall prey to too often thinking that we've got the answers, operating in the solution space instead of the problem space, thinking that we can guess it or that our intuition, knows best. And I just don't think it's necessary to do that. And there's a better way to make decisions, and they can be anchored in actual customer value being delivered.
My name is Jochem van der Veer. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called TheyDo, the journey management platform for business decision-making. We raised over $50 million and are growing globally. Our enterprise customers include Ford, J&J, the Home Depot, and Pfizer. I mean, wherever you look, understanding customers is key to staying ahead. But in order to do this at scale, aligning so many different teams with the customer journey is incredibly hard, but it is possible. I really wish this podcast existed before we started our company, because so many companies are organizing around journeys and there's so much to learn. So in order to share what I'm learning, what I'm hearing with our community, I meet with industry experts. And in my video podcast, I'm here to explore the world of business strategy, design, and journeys, customer journeys, to really get an understanding of how leaders are changing their way in their business. So let's dive into the show. So my guest today is Gia Laudi. She is a growth advisor, author, and speaker, but most importantly, an incredibly experienced marketer. She wrote the book Forget the Funnel and runs a podcast with the same name. The first time I learned about her was when she shared how marketing and success came together at the Airbnb headquarters, and the journey, the blueprint was taped to the wall. And she basically had a light bulb moment what CX mapping was about. Obviously, I wasn't there. I heard her speak about it, but it's a great way to introduce her. Since 2010, she's played a key role in driving growth for high growth, recurring revenue startups, including Bitly, Sprout Social, AppQ, SparkToro, just to name a few. Her expertise actually lies in operationalizing customer experience. So, Gia, I am very excited to have you here with me today.
I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, I want to start with CX mapping, which is a term that you used intentionally. Maybe we should start by defining what CX is. What do you define customer experience as?
Yes, this very broad term used in very many different contexts. I tend to lean on the term customer experience mapping as its sort of juxtaposition to customer journey mapping. It's meant to sort of separate itself from that sort of exercise or, artifact that can live inside of companies that teams lean on to make decisions. And customer journey mapping has been around for so long and has been relied on as this sort of go-to process that has generally been associated with like transactional moments of success. And I say that like traditionally. I know not every team, just automatically associates customer journey mapping with like life cycle moments and transactional moments, but I've seen it enough where I was like, no, I need to separate what we're doing from the customer journey mapping exercise as being really about the customer experience, because it is broader in scope. It takes into account the problem space. So many customer journey maps don't take the problem space into account, like what's going on in a customer's world before they even know that you exist. What old way are they struggling with? Most customer journey maps don't include that. Similarly, most customer journey maps don't include post-acquisition, expansion, continued engagement, value growth, basically where recurring revenue businesses, which are the ones that we're primarily focused on, really shine. So again, most customer journey maps are narrower in focus, at least in my experience, not all, but in general. And so we lean on customer experience mapping as a way to sort of separate the exercise that many of the teams that we're working with might be somewhat familiar with. So it's a way to just separate the two.
So when you do that, is it because there's a preconceived notion in these teams? Like if we do a journey map, it starts with the first touch point we can measure, and that's where the journey starts. Is that how teams come to you? Or is it really like if I start to do research on what a journey map is, if I hear it for the first time, I go into the wrong crutches of the internet?
So it's interesting. One of the things that you just said is like why companies come to us. Companies do not come to us for customer journey mapping or customer experience mapping. They don't care. That is just a means to an end. Generally, though, is it because it's measurable? I just think that there's like a lot of preconceived notions around life cycle moments and transactional moments. So prior to this moment at the Airbnb office that you sort of alluded to at the beginning of this. Prior to that experience, I had been a marketer for almost a decade. I had been, living in the MQL, PQL, SQL hellscape that is like marketing and tech. And it was all about like trial starts and credit card entered and, these very transactional moments of measuring customer success. And so I really, when I saw that, and I know they call it a customer journey map. I believe they do. Actually, it's not even important. Again, like the name doesn't really matter here. But when I saw that, I was like, oh, wait a minute. This has completely flipped the customer experience on its head. It's completely through the lens of this customer. It was illustrated. There was the like emotional journey was part of it. And so the heart of the customer journey maps or customer experience maps that we create are really around like identifying what are the major leaps of faith in our customer's relationship with us. And then the measurement part comes after that. So we have to first figure out what is going to help a customer get from one step to the next. What's the experience they need? What's that value they need to experience along this end-to-end customer, this relationship with us. And then we identify KPIs that will sort of tie back to that. But is that what companies are seeking us out for? No. Mostly what actually teams will say and founders will say when they reach out is like, we want to take a more systematic approach to growth. Like we know it's like chaos right now. We're relying too much on like guesswork, intuition. A lot of teams talk about like the lengths they'll go to and the amount of like experiments and A/B tests that they're running, but that it doesn't feel anchored enough in what's actually in the best interest of the customer. And so generally when we're working with teams, we're trying to create a more sort of systematic approach to thinking about the customer experience. So that's how we sort of approach it. But again, it's not what they're asking for, but it's ultimately the tool that we will develop to help them get to, the calm after some of that chaos.
I love that. And I know in your book, Forget the Funnel, you basically deconstruct the whole system that actually builds this up. But for people listening, like, can you give a sample of what that system is about and what companies often get wrong when they think about operationalizing customer experience and to tying it all together? Because even without you being there, they realize we have a problem. It's not rooted in something more foundational, or there is something more than what we are doing. Like, how do companies solve that without you? And what are some of the maybe lesser known parts of your system that make it actually work or click together?
There's a lot in the question you just answered. So I'll answer like what the process is that we go through. So we call it customer-led growth. That was primarily, by the way, like the name is not important at all, but it was primarily, again, in sort of relationship to what's going on in what we see going on in the market. There's a big push towards product-led growth, product-led sales, sales-led, this whole like product-led versus sales-led sort of debate. And customer-led growth is really meant to help, hopefully the goal with it is to help teams sort of orient around, like, it doesn't matter what growth model you ultimately choose. What matters is what is the most appropriate customer experience to provide. And the model that you leverage on top of that has to be, again, rooted back into that customer experience, whether it's product-led or sales-led or a combination of the two, or marketing-led or community-led. There's all these, sort of models that are becoming more and more popular. And our stance is like, no, you have to be customer led first. And that is, if you anchor in the customer experience, then the growth models that you layer on top of that will become much, much more obvious. And you'll know what to do and what to say at all of those points, and, where to leverage each and how to enable the team to make better decisions across that, again, that end-to-end customer experience. So the process that we use is basically like at the top level, we describe it as like get inside your best customers' heads, map and measure their experience, again, that end-to-end customer journey, and then identify the opportunities to improve their experience and optimize and identify those levers for growth. That's often what we're doing. So it sounds very simple. Obviously, there's a lot that goes into each one of those things. So at the heart, identifying, getting inside the heads of your best customers. Obviously, I'm talking about research there, but there's a lot that goes into that. So like who you learn from, not all customers are created equally, the style of research that you leverage, right? The research method that you leverage there is all kind of important and behind that, like get inside your best customers' heads. And then the mapping and measuring of their experience is obviously the customer experience mapping process, which we've talked about. Identifying the major leaps of faith, but also the how we measure success. And then the last step is really like, okay, now that we know what an ideal customer experience looks like and should look like, let's look at what we're doing today and identify all the ways that our current customer experience is out of alignment with that ideal customer experience. So that's the process. That's the sort of end-to-end process that we use in the background to help teams basically get, make better decisions and be more sort of strategic and organized in how they make those decisions.
The second part of the question was more like, what are the non-obvious pieces of this? And one thing that stands out for me is that, and I'm hoping you can give me some examples, is the leap of faith. Like, what do you mean with that? The leap of faith? What does that mean to you?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a few layers there. So it might not, I know it doesn't surprise you to hear, but it might also not surprise, listeners to hear that we do lean on the jobs to be done approach to run our research and guide the conversations that we have with customers, but also like, what is that documentary-like understanding of their end-to-end customer experience? We lean a lot on jobs to be done. Now, part of the input there is like, what is this customer trying to accomplish? What's the context that they're in? But then there's also, what are customers' expectations today, right? That's the other thing too. Like it's not just about the customer input. It's not just about what the team is trying to accomplish, which by the way, is a huge input for us when we work with teams. We're not just learning from customers and taking what customers say at face value and saying you have to change to better match customers. A lot of what we're doing is trying to basically toe the line between the direction that the company is going in and also what customers say as an input to that. The other input to that is our experience in B2B SaaS and knowing the market, lots of experience working with B2B SaaS teams over the years, knowing what teams are capable of, knowing what the technology is capable of, knowing what customers' expectations are, thinking about the product and customer experience through the lens of like not only what they want, but what's possible to deliver that value. So those milestones are really helping customers see value, right? Experience value and see value. And what is that customer experience that's going to help them do that? So a leap of faith might be when somebody lands on on your website, and they're struggling with the old way. They've finally decided that they want a new solution. On that website, something's got to do the job of communicating that you understand the problem that they're trying to solve, and that your solution is going to be right for them, or conversely, not right for them and deter them from signing up, right? So just like making sure that the people that are actually a product fit for your solution see themselves, whether that's in the messaging, in the imagery, in the acquisition model, right? That matters a lot too. Like, are you leveraging freemium or a trial, or you're going to a demo? Like all of that comes into play when you're trying to help a customer make that sort of leap of faith in handing over their email address or being willing to invest any sort of time in exploring your solution more. So that's an example of a leap of faith. Another example of a leap of faith is when somebody, makes that decision to try your product. We want to help them see value and prove that the checks we were writing on the website can be cashed inside the product experience itself. And so like proving that the promises that we made, we can actually fulfill those, demonstrating value as quickly as possible. Are we going to get all the way? No, but helping them see themselves, see that sort of promise of value, and that like we might not solve their job to be done in the first couple of minutes or first couple of hours of that early product experience, but they will at least see the promise of that the potential is there. So we tend to break down the customer experience maps in like the evaluation phase into first value and value realization. Sometimes there's a value promise milestone in there because product might be more, or customer might be more complex, and there might be a couple more stages there. So our CX maps are a little bit malleable in that way. But in general, the evaluation phase is helping them get from like that first moment of first value, like, all right, I'll come back after my lunch break, or like, I'll come back after that coffee that I want to have, and actually invest some more time in this. So it's really important to demonstrate first value very quickly. And then value realization is where they first experience the like, okay, my job, my like big job, the big job is going to be solved by this product. And they really believe that this is the path forward. And that's usually where their willingness to make a purchase decision is at its highest, right? There's wiggle room in there. So that would be another sort of leap of faith where they've used the product in such a way that demonstrates that we're going to help them solve their job to be done. So that's like 3. Obviously, there's more than that, but hopefully those examples resonate.
A lot. I want to ask you about this idea of product centricity versus customer centricity, because what I'm seeing is that a lot of the companies that you're talking about, they go through this cycle of like becoming really customer led, but they're a product company. And then we see the enterprise companies take a product first approach to organizing their business and completely forgetting about their customer somewhere along the way. And being product first or customer led or product led, like terminology, potato in some cases. But what's your take on this? Like, are they interchangeable? And should we be more intentional about naming these things, or is that not something that is important?
Oh boy, this is such a good question. I don't think people talk about this enough, honestly. And I would say it comes down to, now bear in mind, the teams that we're working with are generally tech startups at various stages of growth, but they're generally tech companies. So generally, tech companies are started by people who think in terms of product. So they are very product first because they're generally product people or technical people. That's not always the case, but it is very, very often the case. I mean, even as we started Forget the Funnel back in 2017, that was a big sort of debate or contention, and it's still felt today, is this relationship between the leadership team of a tech company and the marketing team or the customer facing team that is responsible for like bringing it to market and building awareness and helping communicate the value. And there's a lot of disconnect there. In fact, it's why we even launched Forget the Funnel. It was really in like helping folks inside of tech first type of companies put the sort of center of gravity at the customer layer instead of at the technical product layer, or instead of at the more marketing or sales layer. A lot of what we were trying to do was help technical teams and product teams see the value of marketing and see the value of like those customer facing teams as being revenue drivers. So does that perfectly answer your question? Probably not, but it comes down to team dynamic. It comes down to a lot of times the leadership team is the one that sort of sets the stage there. What we've seen is that a lot of teams will start out as being very product focused, very technology focused. And then eventually they get to a certain level of growth. And then they realize, oh, wait, we don't actually, like we didn't actually dot all our I's and cross our T's. And we've got all this, not technical debt, but like CX debt. And they need to go back and sort of fix the customer experience layer that lives on top of their product. So there's a lot of that happens at a certain stage of growth in a lot of these companies.
Talk to me about CX depth. How do I know I have it? I mean, we have a lot of our customers are maybe larger tech companies that are over thousands of people, but they also have what I believe you would call CX
I
debt. Like,
imagine
how
they
would you
do.
define that?
Yeah. So I would say it's probably, maybe this is a very simple example, but like the sign up flow on a website as an example, where the product team owns that experience, and the marketing team or the team responsible for acquisition on the website has no influence or power over what that sort of acquisition sort of piece, what that experience actually looks like, or the copy that's there, or the language that's there, or the fields that are, presented in the sign up flow. There's not a lot of influence there, even though they're responsible for that. I can't even believe I am still saying this in 2025, but so many teams, they have email series after somebody signs up, especially in a freemium model. There's an email series where it's like, day 1, welcome. Day 3, you should do this today. Day 7, you should do that. Like, what on earth? What world are we living in that we're still relying on days from sign up, like sign up plus 7 days, sign up plus 14 days? Like, what year is this? We're capable of so much more. That programmatic type of comms, so many teams are not taking advantage of that. And I would consider that, CX debt, where they're just not putting their best foot forward. They are not serving the right message to the right customer at the right time. They're just, relying on stale practices from, decades prior, to still sort of, guide the customer experience, when we are capable of so much more. We have access to so much data to be able to trigger meaningful and much more personalized and segmented, customer experiences than we do today. I don't know, maybe bigger companies are better at this, but not in my experience. even from the small B2B SaaS companies we work with to the $100 million ones, they all kind of suffer from this, and it never ceases to blow my mind.
No, one of the solutions they put in place is put a customer experience team there.
Right.
And they get the
That's
juicy
right.
task of removing all the friction, but they
Yes,
don't
that's
have
right.
authority, and they can't build or, like you say,
Yep.
deliver any meaningful impact in the actual product
Yeah.
experience, in the digital experience.
Yeah, that's right. They're called customer success in the software and in B2B SaaS. The customer success team just like plays whack-a-mole and tries to, plug the holes where they can identify them, but never have, a bigger sort of strategic role in what that customer experience should be. I mean, that's exactly why we exist, is to help teams basically build a system around that.
Yeah, I love that. And it's also raises the question, like, who should own customer experience?
Mhm.
Is there even an owner? Do we co-own it? Should it be the CEO? Does she hold the keys to the kingdom? Is she the one protecting customer experience as a whole? Like, who should own this? Is there ownership in here? Like, how do you think about that?
It's a really good question. I think it depends on the company. I mean, again, I can answer from a B2B SaaS standpoint in general. I would say the steward is product marketing. Is that always the case? No, there's lots of different structures of team. And, maybe if you've got a more sales-led model, that might not be the case. Although in my opinion, I think it should. I think product marketing is wildly, wildly underutilized at software companies. Anyway, that's an episode in and of itself. But I think product marketing is really, really well positioned to be at the heart of sales, marketing, customer success, and product. Is that always the case? No, not necessarily. And not all companies have product marketing functions. Sometimes product marketing is inside of marketing. Sometimes it's inside of product. Sometimes there's none at all. Sometimes it's its own team. So that would be my answer, again, for a B2B SaaS scenario. But obviously it's a much bigger thing that probably looks very different inside of more traditional businesses or larger organizations, where if there's a customer experience team, like a CX team, I mean, in my mind, it seems pretty obvious that would be where it lives, but the teams that we work with, they don't have a CX team. We're lucky
No,
if they have
right.
a PMM, honestly.
the customer experience function in large organizations typically starts in service. And then the customer experience is about having a good service when you're frustrated and you're going to call and have an agent on the phone. And that's where part of it originated. And then here in B2B, we talk about customer experience as maybe the way that you describe it. Never heard someone product marketing should own it. So that's one I'm definitely going to keep an eye on.
But again, bear in mind that I'm talking about product companies predominantly.
Of course.
Yeah.
The thing about this is that what prompted this was saying like, okay, there's product centric, there's customer centric. But then if you go into a company that has one product, it is the same, the customer experience, the product experience, it all ties back to do that same thing. But as you scale, you have multiple products, all these different teams, you add services, like it becomes pretty complicated. And then customer experience becomes its own thing, but it doesn't really have that foundation. So maybe this is a good segue into something else that sparked my interest in talking to you today. And that is the shift in how we think about customer experience in general. Obviously, AI is one of the culprits here, but you had a post, and let me see if I can find it here. I got us chatting over LinkedIn, and you said, and I'm going to ask you about this, after 2 years of experimenting with AI for customer research, I'm skipping a few bits, I finally landed on what now feels like the most completely obvious value add. We've conducted over 1,500 customer interviews for over 100 companies, and the last 2 years continuously experimenting with AI in various forms. And the TLDR, still reading from you, AI can't replace human research in customer interviews or in the analysis of those conversations, but it can assist. So this was a month ago. Have you changed your mind on it already since developments go really fast? Or where is this going? Like, tell me more what's in your head.
I'm so glad you said that, because the one thing that it will remain true about AI, at least for the foreseeable future, is that like it's changing on a dime. No, my opinion hasn't changed, but I think the sort of scope of research is worth talking about here, because I've been on a bunch of podcasts in the last, couple of months, workshops and webinars, and this topic obviously comes up every single time. And I've gotten a lot of my like LinkedIn inbox has kind of blown up, on this topic. And a lot of folks are like, hey, well, have you tried Perplexity? Have you done, like, they're asking about these teams where they're really referring to synthetic or like third-party data and not first-party. And that's really what I'm talking about. So when I described the process, the CLG, the customer-led growth process earlier, is like, get inside the heads of your best customers. How do you do that? All right. There's a number of different ways to do that, but the way that we sort of start the type of research that we rely on to do this customer experience mapping and identifying of growth levers is really understanding those ideal customers first and foremost. And what we use to do that is like 10 to 12 jobs to be done interviews. Now, there's like a quant component to this ahead of time, because who we reach out to run those customer interviews is really, really important. We don't just reach out to the entire customer base and ask to speak to everybody. So segmentation, wildly, wildly important. And then we run those human-led customer interviews. I mean, I don't think anybody would disagree with, like, if you were reached out to by a company that said, we have an AI assistant researcher that's going to interview you for 30 minutes, do you think that people would actually show up to that call? Like, it's
not even for a voucher, right? I was like, no, thank you.
100%. I mean, we're like, my name is Heidi. I have 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth. Like, you're booking my calendar. It is very important that somebody feels like they're going to speak to a human, and then that conversation is then led like an actual conversation where there's follow-ups and there's, when somebody answers in a certain way, it's like, it's kind of the difference between like survey results and an interview transcript. And so we find that obviously customer interviews, human-led customer interviews, are basically the best input into identifying what is that job to be done, what is that documentary-like understanding that we need of customers to understand where their leaps of faith are, so that we can then operationalize the customer experience and help teams identify these opportunities for growth. Now, could you, after you do that type of foundational research, could you then go out and do competitive intel and competitive research? For sure. Could you do win-loss analysis? For sure. Could you do larger market and audience research? Absolutely. But for the type of research that we're leveraging in order to help teams, again, have a more sort of systematic approach to growth, there is nothing that will replace that foundational research. But there are all kinds of sort of supplemental type of research that you would layer on later. And I encourage every team that we work with to do that. In fact, we talk about opportunities for further research when we work with teams. But identifying that foundational story and that foundational job to be done, prioritizing around that, whichever, job to be done you decide to prioritize. That's at the sort of heart of things. So the other thing that I would say is individuals need to run those conversations and those interviews. Analysis of the transcripts or analysis of the calls. Now that is a bit of there's a lot of opportunity there. My opinion is ever shifting there. I think that AI is getting a lot better in the analysis, but you still, like everything else, you still need a subject matter expert to interpret the garbage in, garbage out possibility there, or but that's true across the board. That's true with content production, with copywriting. It's the same with research as well. So you definitely need a skilled researcher to leverage these AI tools. I think removing the human from the analysis of those conversations can be really problematic because things can sort of go off the rails, but it's getting better and better all the time.
If you're enjoying this conversation, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast channel and leave a review. It makes all the difference. The Experience Edge podcast is where I interview business leaders, CX pioneers, and the best designers who share their insight on creating business impact, having an edge on the customer experience. Do you want more exclusive content and behind-the-scenes access? Check out the Experience Edge podcast on YouTube and LinkedIn so you don't miss a thing. Now let's get back to the conversation. Especially if you do this for foundational research, right? You're launching a new product, you're thinking about a new value prop, there's unlimited potential. Then you want to do that initial 0 to 1 research really well. Right. But once you have something in place, let's say you take those 12 jobs to be done interviews, you have the timeline, how generally people like this make progress and where the different barriers are and where you can have those leaps of faith. Then you start to build against it. And then you want to keep adding new data to it. Then maybe AI is helping you to do it. But the 0 to 1 stage, I agree. The tools are not there yet to do it. Mm-hmm. Do you think they will be there in, let's say, take a longer time horizon? Can you see yourself talk to a virtual Gia doing interview, job to be done style for a company?
I can't see it. I can't see people's willingness to get on a customer interview increasing because of AI. Leveraging an AI interviewer, because that's really what we're talking about here is the literal interviews themselves. The processes that surround that, absolutely. Like I said, identifying the right customers to talk to, the outreach to those people potentially. There's all kinds of automation. I mean, that's not AI, but there's all kind of automation we can use for the outreach and making sure that it's seamless and that we're catching people and whatever. And that will evolve and continue to evolve and get better. We have yet to, by the way, lean on software for that. We do that very manually right now to ensure the highest response rate possible. So we still do that. We're doing that by hand, so to speak, because it is so critical for us to speak with the right customers. So maybe that will get better over time. The analysis, I think for sure will get better over time. How you apply that to the customer experience potentially. So the thing that we do, right, is we run those interviews where we identify generally about 3 to 5 jobs to be done. And then we meet with the team and say, this is what we learned from your customers. Let's align on which of these jobs to be done or jobs to be done, sometimes multiple. Generally, we're trying to focus on one. But it does happen where there's more than one that we move forward with. But there's an alignment with the team on how do we feel about the opportunity here? Let's prioritize one of them. And is with that hat or with those glasses or in those shoes that we do the sort of secret shopper thing where we're doing sort of a heuristic of their existing customer experience. Now, could AI potentially help in the future with that? Potentially, particularly if we could train an AI model to not be synthetic, but like trained on first party data and then do the secret shopper thing. Yep, there could be the potential for that in the future. Right now, we also do that by hand because we don't have a sort of tool to do that, but there's potential there. And then, like I said, supplemental research, I think the top has been blown off of supplemental research. I think there's all kinds of amazing opportunities. I think where things get a little bit confusing is there's a lot of podcasters, especially in the marketing space, that are talking about like customer research in 20 minutes. That is not customer research. That's market research or audience research, or you can't call that customer research. And so there's a lot of sort of imitation customer research that has been just permeating its way into particularly marketing teams that I think was inevitable. Inevitable because there's a big resistance to customer research. People think of customer research as like a make work project, right? There's long been sort of negative associations with customer research. Everybody's been part of a customer research project that like yielded not great results or led to more, questions than answers, or, was put dusty on a shelf and never used and referenced again. Like we've all participated in research projects like that. So customer research has a PR problem already. And so it was sort of inevitable that these marketing teams who are responsible for a ridiculous amount of output, honestly, would rely on AI to produce a blog post or come up with like synthetic personas to make decisions. And that makes me really nervous. For awareness level marketing, I think it's, there's a lot there, and I think it's pretty interesting. When it comes to like product marketing though, and your positioning and your core messaging and the customer experience that you're designing, I get very nervous for teams when they're like, oh, we can just use AI to do this instead of taking, a month to talk to our customers. That makes me, and I see like senior product marketing managers leveraging like ChatGPT to identify like jobs to be done. I'm like, you have customers. There's no reason for you to not reach out to just like 10 or 12 of them. That is not, that's not too much. It shouldn't be too much to ask, particularly when you have a team that you're responsible for the salaries of and a board and investors, to be, making strategic decisions about how to grow based on AI insights makes me really nervous for teams right now.
So what do you think if we would look at, 100 sample companies, some great performers, some average performers, doesn't matter. And we look at their marketing messaging. Are we going to see GPT-based positioning work messaging that is lazy? Or will we, from the best ones, only see genuine customer-led approaches because those teams know and the other ones are doing synthetic? Or would there be a mix of both where actually some of that is generated by GPT because people are lazy and they'll never tell because they are actually getting paid to do this. So they'll always say, or their ideas based on research. But where are you on this? Are we already seeing the market flooded with like these GPT-based positioning statements that are based on synthetic data that kind of sound all right, but miss the mark, but are like, where are you on this? What do you think?
I mean, I think that's always been a problem. There's always been mediocre marketing in the world. I don't think AI is the culprit there. I think it's marketing teams under a lot of pressure to just do too much with too little. I think expectations on marketing teams have, especially in tech, have been very wildly like misunderstood, and they're underpaid, right? The expectations are very high, and they're generally pretty underpaid and underappreciated in general. That's not always the case, but I think there's been mediocre marketing forever. For as long as there's been marketing, there's been mediocre marketing. So I don't actually think that that's that big of an issue, because I do think that AI is a very helpful tool for refining and brainstorming and improving and optimizing. I think there's a huge opportunity there. Where I get nervous is when teams are making like major growth decisions or major strategic decisions based on, opinion. Again, that's always been a problem. AI generated, ideas, again, always kind of been the problem. A lot of guesswork. So it still comes down to guesswork at the end of the day, whether or not you're using AI to guess or not. I think the refining of messaging and positioning, I think what's going to happen is it's going to get even more chaotic for teams. I think that teams are going to, there were already a lot of silos between marketing, sales, customer success, product. I think those silos are going to get worse because they're all going to go down their own rabbit holes. And then they're going to Frankenstein the thing. And that was always happening. It's not like that wasn't an issue before, it was. But I think that's what has the potential to get worse. It's like, well, I learned this and well, I learned that. And when it contradicts who wins, when it was AI generated, right? Like who's going to win that battle? And the determining factor on who's going to win that battle depends on teams, and that's probably another episode in of itself. But I guess that's sort of where I land on it, is that I just think it's going to get more chaotic and messier and less straightforward for teams to see the forest for all of the trees. It was just more trees.
Right. Yeah, I noticed that as well. There's more trees. In your system, like what is the foundation to come back to? Like once teams start to scale, once the Frankenstein could emerge but won't emerge, like what's the secret to teams who are cracking that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to end up repeating myself here, but like centering around the job to be done, the depth of understanding, the context. Now that job to be done will evolve over time, but in the short and midterm, really staying focused on the job to be done that was prioritized by the company, depending on company goals and the product as it exists today versus the future version. So reorienting around the job to be done always. I often suggest to teams that they write the customer job statement on a sticky and like stick it on the side of your computer monitor, and like when in doubt, reorient back around, like what is it that we're helping customers achieve? And then the other thing is going to sound very obvious and probably going to be preaching to the choir to you, is going back to that customer experience map and those milestones and the measure of success, and really remembering like what are people doing, thinking, and feeling at each of those milestones, and make decisions in that context. Because the sort of spaghetti at the wall or all the trees sort of problem, even pre-AI, is solved by never providing customers with like more than they're ready for in a given moment of time. And that is a constant battle. That is not, we often work with teams where they're like, oh, this is really bad. Hey, and we're like, well, this is not unique to you. Like everybody struggles with this. This is not a unique issue. A lot of teams have the tendency to like throw the kitchen sink at their customers when they first sign up because they're just so excited and they want them to know about all these shiny features. And, that's a problem across the board. But operationalizing the customer experience, identifying KPIs, and then actually developing, strategies around how to influence the customer and help support the customer at each of those milestones, and not, provide too much all at once. It's like, it's the promise of the right message to the right person at the right time. So reorienting around the job to be done, reorienting around the customer experience and those milestones, and like that foundational, and then obviously like revisiting it and refining it as you learn and adding to it and optimizing. And every once in a while, it will be useful to sort of go back. So I often get asked like, how often do you do this? And obviously the perfect answer is like, it's iterative and always. But we often say for this foundational sort of like jobs to be done type of research where we're mapping the customer experience, we often say like, when the product changes enough where the value that you provide genuinely has shifted, do this type of research again, find recent customers, figure out what was the context that they made decisions in, and then like validate that the customer experience map and those milestones are still relevant, and then do that heuristic of your existing customer experience so that you can compare to what would be ideal. So like the answer is it depends. But in absence of having like a major shift in your product strategy, then we generally say like twice a year, depending on how, quickly you're sort of evolving your offering.
I love that. This was super helpful. And then I'm thinking visually how this also would look. Would I then see the experience map from left to right, where it's like, I'm problem aware, I become solution aware, and there's these different milestones in it. And then from top to bottom, there's these different people that all have a different job to be done. And you're messaging against where are they literally on the coordinates. And this is what we have to say to them. And this is how we measure if they're moving along. Is that roughly what you have in mind as well when you do these kinds of exercises?
Generally, except that I would say there would be where we try to start is we do one customer experience map per job to be done. And that doesn't mean that the milestones wouldn't be similar, but we do try to put just like one hat on when we go through that customer experience and really think through like what is the messaging that would resonate with them? What is the product or customer, like what is the product experience that would really resonate? What are the parts of the product that we should show them in what order? And that will change from customer segment to customer segment or job to be done to job to be done. So we tend to try to like put blinders on to everything else and sort of suspend disbelief that it would be would be unique just to one job to be done. But oftentimes what we do find is once we've done a couple that they will have similar milestones, but they should be segmented. So like at sign up or at demo, whatever the acquisition model is, you should segment at that point so that you're providing the most relevant customer experience per job to be done. And then what was the other thing that you've talked about, like different layers? So we tend to break it down by like the doing, thinking, feeling, the KPI. We talk a lot about like what programs would come in and out at various milestones. Identifying opportunity. We identify opportunity by milestone, obviously. So a lot of times we're helping teams sort of think about like, hey, that onboarding series that actually went past 3 of these milestones. So we're going to like right size it for where a customer is in their customer experience. So a lot of times we're sort of pulling apart and deconstructing a lot of the programmatic stuff that they have in place so that it's more right sized for what a customer is ready for at a given milestone. I don't know if that answered your question though.
Yeah, it did. I don't think there's one way of thinking about this. It depends also from company to company.
Totally. Yeah.
I'm seeing a lot of these. I like the notion of like one job per map, basically, to really understand how to decompose and basically center around the one thing that matters rather than have 10 things that matter, because then it's really hard to manage at scale, which I'm seeing companies struggle with. But the other thing that stands out for me, which I really like, is that you do want to refresh this, right? And I want to ask you do you believe jobs to be done interview is the only tool you need to have in your research toolkit? Because there are so many other ways to interview customers. And what I'm seeing companies do when they don't have a systematic approach, it's whatever the researcher, whatever the insights team, whatever the product team, whoever is conducting the research likes to find out. And then the questions get structured. But I imagine there's also a secret sauce to consistently asking the right questions in a specific format or in a specific way to get the best out of this. Is that true? Or if jobs change, it doesn't matter, then you can cycle your research as well. How do you think about that?
I mean, I think the answer is both. I wouldn't do one without the other. So we definitely see that a lot, right? We'll work with teams that have, in marketing, they're doing competitive research, and in the product team, they're doing UX research, and that's all very valuable inputs. And I think that those teams should definitely continue to do that style of customer research, but it should be rooted in that foundational job to be done. And we don't have to call it job to be done. I feel like such a broken record when I use that term, but really like what are customers trying to accomplish? And that
map, whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly. I often describe it as like that documentary of your customer's relationship with you. So if you have a solid foundational understanding of what that experience should look like, then all the other types of research, which again, I mentioned before, like the roof has been blown off of all those different types of research, I think. There's so much opportunity to do that so much better today, but that foundational piece needs to be there. So any like UX research that is done should should be based on the big job, right? Like there's big jobs and little jobs. And so I'm describing the big job. If you don't understand what your customers, the big job to be done is, that's where you need to start. And then these other things can be inputs, but they can't lose the sort of plot, that sort of narrative of that bigger job to be done. So we work with a lot of teams that have some like, we did customer interviews already. We did UX interviews, or we ran our annual customer survey last year. And like, we use these inputs, or we have discovery call recordings. Again, all very valuable inputs, but they are inputs to that bigger picture. And so it's that bigger picture that we need to get that clarity on, map the customer experience, identify those major milestones, and then start layering in additional research in really meaningful ways. And I mean, I could go on and on and on, but hopefully that answers your question. I think it's both. But what we see so often is that teams have piecemeal insights across. It's the same thing, right? It's like customer experience debt. It's the same thing as like sort of research. Little insights here and there, but the big picture is missing.
Yes, I love that. And this is actually the thing that I'm excited about for where AI can actually help with the analysis. So when you think about this experience map, that's the anchor, right? You know exactly where the struggling moment is. You know where you can, in your words, can take the leap of faith. So if that's the anchor, and everyone ventures off in doing UX research and market research and talking to customers, and even all the discovery calls sales is making, and all the customer success calls that are happening with your customers, and all the other parts of maybe customer service where there is all the tickets, and every piece of feedback you're getting could be anchored back onto your experience map, if you will. But that's laborious work. We don't have the resources, and this is where AI can help. Like that's where your anchor is. And running that against it, like we're doing that for a large airline right now, and they have thousands of email threads of support around the specific, very, very specific. You can imagine what all the simple jobs to be done are when you're flying with an airline.
Yeah.
But running that against that anchor will give new weights to like, hey, this is the job, what we're doing. Here's what we are seeing our customers typically struggle with. But based on the last 3 months' data, this one is not really a current pain point. It's actually here. And that shifts continuously by, shifting customer expectations, or maybe things outside of your control, or maybe things that have shipped from another team and basically influenced the wrong way in the experience. So that's where I have high hopes for where AI can actually help. But you need that anchor, which is, I think, the point you're trying to make.
Yeah. And like contextualizing the insight, because otherwise you run the risk of taking the wrong takeaway from the research if it's not anchored in what part of the customer experience we're actually, referring to. Or, that sounds amazing. I would love that for every company that we work with to have that like sort of feedback loop inside of each of those, steps or milestones. I think that's wildly, wildly valuable. I totally agree that I think AI gives us a lot of opportunity there to organize the data too, right? Because the amount of data that we could capture at any given time is endless. And we have to anchor it in something. And what better anchor than what the business depends on, which is helping customers experience value at the right time. And, at the end of the day, I'm not sure what else is more important than that if you're running a business, right? Our ability to help customers reach moments of value, make decisions. I don't think there's much else that really matters, which is actually why we focus on recurring revenue businesses. Because when we first started with this, my sort of early marketing experience was like marketing and customer facing teams have so much value to provide companies. And I fell in love with the SaaS business model, the recurring revenue business model, because I was like, finally, this is a group of companies. This is like a business model that lives and dies based on customer value being delivered, in a continuous way. And surely that business model is going to prioritize the customer experience. And so that was the whole reason why I went, as a marketing person went from focusing on like more traditional businesses to recurring revenue, because surely those companies understand better than anybody else that delivering continuous value is wildly important, and marketing has a role to play across the entire customer experience. So it's like, those are my people, I'm going there. And
you choose the easy path, basically, is what you're saying.
Yeah, well, I mean, it should have been. I mean, it's been a long time. That was in, I'll say 2010. I probably had that, like, oh, I got to go work with tech companies, recurring revenue companies. And I've been, maybe unsurprisingly, sort of like on this soapbox ever since, that, that should be the anchoring of every business, let alone recurring revenue businesses, where their very business model is based on their ability to deliver continued value, through the eyes of customers. So anyway, that was my whole like.
But I think you make a valid point, right? Even for the traditional companies, like the ones that are doing better, it seems on the outset, on the customer experience side, are the recurring revenue models, like the utilities companies, the telcos, like the ones that are actually having a subscription-based relationship with their customers.
Yep.
So they need to deliver value again and again and again to retain them, make sure you buy more products from them. And if you buy a car, well, yeah, you'll stick around for the next decade or so, but we are not guaranteed the next purchase from you. So I think you're right that recurring revenue businesses have way more urgency to focus on the customer experience. Yeah. But it also seems that you are saying we're still figuring out how to keep ourselves anchored. Yeah. If you had like a magic wand and to make one thing go away that is still not in place or still not true for customer experience, or maybe like tech businesses in general, like what would you wish for us as a space?
Oh, wow. That's a really good question. I mean, I think the trap that we fall into as like professionals in our work is we too often lose sight of the customer experience. And I say that as like, I work in customer experience every day, all day. And so like, if it isn't ingrained into my mind, then like, whose would it be, right? So the thing that I would hope for teams would be recentering around the customer experience, because I think we fall prey to too often thinking that we've got the answers, operating in the solution space instead of the problem space, thinking that we can guess it, or that our intuition, knows best. And I just don't think it's necessary to do that. And there's a better way to make decisions, and they can be anchored in actual customer value being delivered. And so I see a lot of product teams just get really excited about the technology. And I see a lot of marketing teams get really excited about the latest channel and, the latest marketing tactic. And so neither one of those are anchored in the customer experience. So I think just constantly, I wish teams could remember that. That's why I make that mention of like, write it on a sticky, put it on the side of your monitor, like keep it in front of you. What is it that we're doing here? It is that customer experience we're serving. That's our God we are serving in this business. And so if we're not anchoring what we're doing day in and day out in that, I don't know, like it doesn't make any sense to me otherwise.
It doesn't, but it's so easy to get distracted.
So easy.
All the little things that are also ultimately leading up to a better customer experience. I mean, the most confident people can argue their way to customer experience is my impression. So making sure that all their projects will answer it in some way, but technically they aren't, which is another pitfall. But yeah, I'm with you. I wish that could go away. I'm definitely not seeing that go away pretty
shiny
soon.
Objects. We love our shiny objects, right?
It is. But hey, without the shiny objects, there wouldn't be a customer experience at all, because at some point you have to invent something new. If you ask people what they want, then you might not get what they really need. So that's always a bit of a challenge if you're trying to innovate. But if you try to do more of things that you already do, then sometimes it's easy to forget about the customer experience at all and just optimize your KPI in your little
in your own little bubble, in your own little lane. And yeah, exactly. Losing sight of the rest of the team and all the adjacent teams and their role in the customer experience, which was actually when I first implemented this customer journey map. By the way, you asked about the shape of it. The first customer journey map I ever designed, so to speak, was a circle. Like, it's hysterical to say. I want to go find the designer that I was working with at the time and like track it down because it was a circle. But the thing that excited me about it the most was the unified and sort of shared understanding of the customer experience, the shared language that it gave us, the understanding and empathy for the teams, our adjacent teams, and everybody's, role in the customer experience. That was the part of customer experience mapping that the job to be done. Of course, it's so important in the customer, but like helping the team orient themselves, see the bigger picture, get excited about what they're able to do as a collective. That was actually what first drew me into the customer experience mapping process.
Shall I tell you a secret? The first version of our product was a circular journey map.
No way.
It was. Yes, it was based on the same idea. It was literally the circle. It was based on some of the staffing companies that we were helping with back then. It's like you have a never-ending customer relationship and you're placing people in different businesses and again and again.
Yeah.
So from a talent perspective, that cycle continues. And then from a team perspective, this team touches that touch point here. So we had all these like lines across it.
Yep.
And we started digitizing that. And then we got into the world and people said like, that's not how we do journey mapping. Go away with your little tool. So I was like, all right, the idea was great, but the solution wasn't. But I'm with you there. And I still believe that there is a world where customer journeys can be circular and also visualized as a way.
I think they are. It's maybe not as simple to operationalize potentially inside of a team, but ultimately they are, especially with recurring revenue businesses and like SaaS. I mean, think about like growth loops for product teams, right? Like that's circular. There's no debating that. So, but similarly with like, we're trying to help teams deliver right-sized messaging and like experience for their end customers. We are in a similar situation with the companies that we work with, as I'm sure you are, where like, we have to, we need to meet them where they are and what are they able to sort of operationalize inside of their organizations. Sometimes it's not a circular customer journey map, but the goal is always there, right?
I love that. Gia, this was fantastic. If people want to learn more from you, hear from you, I'm sure they can find you online. What is the best place where all roads lead to all the things that you do? Like, what's the best place to find you?
Yeah, I mean, probably the website. So forgetthefunnel.com. But like you mentioned at the top of this, we do have a book. It's very short. It's very practical. If you want a sort of primer on like, can this work for my team? It's a good one. To just, in a couple of hours, decide whether or not this process is something that would help your team. So that we were very deliberate in making it quite short. We have a podcast. I try to be active on LinkedIn, but I'm not always very successful at it. But LinkedIn is another place that I hang out from time to time too.
Well, thank you for hanging out with me today. I really appreciate it and love to have you on.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This is really fun.
All right, and that's it. Thank you so much for listening. If you found it valuable today, don't forget to subscribe to the Experience Edge on your favorite podcast channel, leave a review, and share it with your team. I'd be delighted. Today's episode was brought to you by Daydo, an AI journey management solution for enterprise. To have an edge on your business strategy and to know why your customers do what they do, visit daydo.com and explore more resources to accelerate your customer experience game. And remember, the journey to creating customer-centric impact never ends, and here's always a new edge to discover in doing things differently. Next week, new episode. Until then, pushing the edge, stay inspired. See you in the next episode.